Here's a question worth sitting with. When did your organization last audit the AI systems it didn't build? Because the risk that lives in your third party AI dependencies, in the models you downloaded, the APIs you call, the data your vendors supply, is just as real as the risk in the systems you built in house. Maybe more so because it's less visible. In this video, we're going deep on AI supply chain risk and third-party management, a dedicated subtopic in Domain 3 and one of the most practical areas of AAIR. Let's get into it. Let me start with why this deserves its own video. AI systems are rarely built in isolation. A typical enterprise AI deployment might use a pre-trained foundation model from a major AI provider, training data from a commercial data vendor, fine-tuning services from a specialized AI consultancy, and inference infrastructure from a cloud provider. Every one of those dependencies is a potential entry point for risk. And unlike traditional software dependencies, where you're primarily worried about security vulnerabilities, AI supply chain risk includes bias embedded in pre-trained models, data quality issues from compromised data providers, and behavioral failures that only manifest in specific contexts. Domain 3E of the AAIR exam covers this directly, and exam questions often describe scenarios where a third-party AI system has caused harm, and candidates must identify what due diligence or contractual control should have been in place. The answer is almost never we should have built it ourselves. The answer is about governance. What oversight, what controls, and what contractual protections should have governed the third-party relationship from the start. Let's talk about what due diligence for AI vendors actually looks like in practice. It starts with documentation. Request model cards, standardized documents that describe the model's training data, intended use cases, performance characteristics, and known limitations. If a vendor can't provide a model card, that's a red flag. Request data sheets for the data sets used in training. Ask for bias testing results. Ask what fairness metrics were evaluated and what thresholds were set. Then assess the vendor's regulatory compliance posture. Do they meet ISO 42001 requirements? Have they assessed their models against EU AI Act obligations? What data processing agreements are in place? And security posture. Does the vendor conduct adversarial testing? Do they have documented incident response procedures? Beyond initial due diligence, ongoing monitoring is essential. Vendor risk doesn't end at contract signing. It continues for the life of the relationship. Model updates, data provider changes, infrastructure migrations, any of these can introduce new risk that wasn't present when the contract was signed. Build ongoing review cycles into your vendor management program for AI providers and make sure those reviews cover AI-specific risk dimensions, not just traditional vendor scorecards. This is the section that surprises many risk professionals because AI supply chain attacks are sophisticated and increasingly documented. Poison models are pre-trained AI models that have been manipulated before being made available. An attacker who contributes to an open source model or compromises a model repository can embed backdoor behaviors, triggers that cause the model to behave maliciously when specific inputs are received. If your organization downloads and deploys such a model without provenance verification, you've inherited an attack. Tampered datasets are a related threat. If a data provider is compromised or is themselves a malicious actor, the training data they supply can encode biases or behaviors designed to degrade model performance or create exploitable patterns. Backdoored APIs are perhaps the most operationally relevant threat for many organizations. If you access AI capabilities through a third-party API, the service provider controls the model. An attacker who compromises that provider, or who is the provider, can manipulate the AI's behavior through the API responses. An open source model risk deserves specific attention. Public model repositories contain thousands of models with varying provenance, limited documentation, and no guarantee of ethical training practices. Using open source models without provenance assessment is a governance gap that AAIR candidates must recognize. Let me ask you to think about something. If the organization you work for or advise uses OpenAI, Google, or Anthropic AI services extensively, and one of those providers experiences a major outage or security incident, how many of your business processes would stop? That's the concentration risk question. And for most organizations, the honest answer is more than we are comfortable with. Concentration risk in AI supply chains arises when an organization becomes heavily dependent on a small number of AI providers or foundation models. The risk is systemic. A failure in a single widely used AI service can cascade across entire industry sectors simultaneously. This is different from traditional IT dependency risk because AI systems from the same provider share the same underlying model vulnerabilities. An adversarial attack that works against one deployment of a foundation model may work against all deployments simultaneously. Concentration risk must be assessed, documented, and included in business continuity planning. What's your organization's contingency if your primary AI provider becomes unavailable? Is there a backup provider? Can the affected processes run manually temporarily? A diversification strategy using multiple AI providers for critical processes or maintaining hybrid approaches reduces concentration exposure. It may increase cost and complexity, but from a risk management perspective, single points of failure in critical AI supply chains are existential risks that warrant mitigation investment. Let's get very practical. When your organization enters a commercial relationship with an AI vendor, the contract is your primary risk management tool. And most standard vendor contracts are not designed for AI. Here's what AI vendor agreements must address. Service level agreements need to define AI-specific performance thresholds, not just uptime, but model accuracy, bias tolerances, and incident response timelines. If the model starts performing below an agreed fairness threshold, what is the vendor's obligation? Data usage rights are critical and often poorly defined in standard agreements. The contract must explicitly state what the vendor can and cannot do with your data. Can they use your data to train their models? If so, under what conditions? This is both a privacy and a competitive intelligence risk. Intellectual property ownership is another area of frequent confusion. Who owns the outputs of an AI system? Who owns a fine-tuned model that was built on the vendor's base model? These questions need to be answered in the contract before they become disputes. And exit clauses must address data portability, model access after termination, and data deletion. A vendor who controls your AI system and your training data has leverage over you, unless the contract specifically addresses what happens when the relationship ends. Let me close by connecting third-party AI risk to the broader GRC framework, because isolated vendor management is not enough. Third-party AI risk must feed into the enterprise risk register. The risks don't live only in the procurement team's vendor database. They are enterprise risks with potential financial, regulatory, and reputational consequences that warrant board-level visibility for significant dependencies. Audit rights are non-negotiable for high-risk AI vendors. Your contract must grant the right to audit the vendor's AI controls and risk management practices, not just their financial controls. The ability to verify compliance is the difference between trust and verification. Regulatory reporting obligations may be triggered by third-party AI failures, particularly in regulated industries like financial services and healthcare. If a vendor's AI system causes harm to your customers, your organization may have notification obligations, regardless of who was technically responsible. And GRC platform integration means your AI vendor risk workflow, due diligence questionnaires, review cycles, risk scoring should be managed within your existing GRC infrastructure, not in a separate spreadsheet. Consistency, auditability, and integration with the enterprise risk register require that AI vendor risk be governed through the same platform and process as all other vendor risk. Third-party AI risk is enterprise risk. Govern it that way.